Hey guys, tonight we're plunging headfirst into the candlelit corridors of castles where lullabies sound suspiciously like political threats, and royal cradles are tucked right next to thrones soaked in betrayal. You're nestled in velvet, swaddled in symbols of power, and before your first tooth breaks through, your mother has already plotted your destiny like it's a board game. There are no mobiles hanging above your crib, just whispers of court spies, veiled threats, and maybe a dagger under the pillow. You've barely learned to babble and someone's whispering in Latin that you're a potential liability. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born to nobility, possibly even royalty, and your first breath is a political event. The tapestries in your chamber are worth more than the peasants who toiled to weave them, and your wet nurse is probably better educated than most lords. But your mother? She isn't singing you to sleep. She's attending secret councils, whispering behind iron doors with men in robes, and scribbling letters in cipher. That soft kiss she left on your forehead might have been a goodbye. Meet one of the most chilling portraits of motherhood gone medieval, a noblewoman, let's call her Lady Iseldra, who married into a kingdom not for love, not for alliance, but for revenge. Her new husband, the king, had banished her uncle years before, and you are her new chess piece. You're not just her child, you're her strategy. And one evening, as torches flicker and the court jests over roasted boar, she slips a few grains of white powder into the king's wine. Just a touch. Enough to make him weary, compliant. Not quite dead. Yet. Historians still argue whether Lady Iseldra was a poisoner or merely a frightened mother securing her child's future. But whatever the truth, the king's health falters like a candle in wind. By your third birthday, he's confined to bed. By your fifth, he's dead, and your mother sits behind the throne, pulling the strings of the regency like a marionette master. Her bedtime stories are warnings, cloaked in riddles. A good heart is a luxury for peasants, she says, smoothing your hair. You ask her what love is, and she tells you, a distraction, unless it can be weaponized. Charming. Your tutors are chosen by her. Your playmates. Vetted like ambassadors. You never cry at night because even tears feel political. Once, a maid catches you talking to a squirrel on the battlements and your mother hears of it by sundown. Never speak to creatures that can't keep secrets, she snaps. Goodbye, squirrel. You learn not to trust hugs, especially the ones that come after public ceremonies. Those are for the crowd. When she kneels to help you mount your pony for the first time, you notice she tightens the stirrup strap a little too hard. Pain is just another lesson. By age 10, you're fluent in 4 languages, but you've never had a real friend. At 12, you're betrothed to someone twice your age. You've learned to keep your face still, even when the idea makes your stomach churn. Your mother calls it maturity. You call it survival. Then there's the milk. In medieval courts, rumors swirl faster than soup spoons, and one of the stickiest whispers is about your mother's strange milk. She insisted on nursing you herself, a rarity for nobles, and had her servants feed her a concoction of fennel, wolf's blood, and something that smelled suspiciously like rosemary and old books. The midwife later claimed the milk tasted sharp. Like metal. Was she strengthening you? Or seeding something darker? No one agrees. One chronicler wrote that you had eyes too black for comfort, and another claimed you never cried as an infant. Only stared. Quirky tidbit. Some later folklore suggests your mother experimented with alchemy to infuse you with royal gravitas, whatever that means. One scroll even claims she consulted a Moorish apothecary who specialized in astral personality transference. Basically medieval horoscopes on steroids. Still, the poison theory endures. Your father's lingering illness, your mother's swift assumption of power, her curious collection of dried herbs and oddly shaped spoons. It never quite added up. Some say it was belladonna. Others whisper, mandrake. Of course, she always denied everything. The king was weak, she'd shrug, adjusting the jewels in her hair. And I was merely devoted. She commissioned paintings of herself holding you, always stiff, oddly posed, your eyes never quite meeting. In one, her hand rests on your shoulder like an anchor. Or a claw. Hard to say. By the time you're 16, you've learned to smile in mirrors the way she does. Practiced. Slightly dangerous. You know how to host a banquet, how to disarm a diplomat, and how to make someone feel important before gutting their political aspirations in 3 words or less. You also know not to turn your back on your mother. Ever. Because when you finally come of age and begin to flex your own political muscles, she tightens her grip. She starts attending your councils. Rewriting your decrees. Publicly correcting you like you're still learning to walk. The nobles watch, and so do the servants, and all of them wonder, who's really ruling this realm? And one night, deep in the velvet quiet, you catch her by the firelight with her old apothecary's box open. A vial in hand. Just reminiscing, she says. Nothing to worry about. Right. As the candles gutter and your chamber falls dark, you think about all the stories she's told you. About strength. About strategy. About how love, real love, is sacrifice. You're still not sure what she meant. But tonight, you dream of milk that tastes like metal and lullabies sung in whispers. And somewhere in the shadows, your mother still watches. You're barely out of childhood, and already the burden of a crown, or at least the illusion of one, rests uncomfortably on your head. Your name. It's more like a title, wielded by others. And your mother? She's no gentle queen tucking you in. She's Empress Matilda, daughter of a king, widow of an emperor, and the kind of mother who looks at kingdoms like puzzle pieces, and you, her son, like the final corner piece she needs to finish the picture. You've just turned 7 when she begins dragging you across damp English coasts and into candlelit stone halls in Normandy, whispering to nobles that you're the rightful heir. She says it with steel in her voice, as if repeating it enough times will make it true, or at least convenient. And here's the real bedtime story. Your grandfather was King Henry I of England, and he made your mother his designated heir after his only legitimate son drowned in a shipwreck. A great tragedy. A political nightmare. But for Matilda, it was her golden opportunity. Historians still argue whether Henry truly believed England would accept a queen regnant, or whether he simply ran out of options. Either way, Matilda believed it with all the fiery conviction of a woman who'd been Empress of the Holy Roman Empire and didn't take no for an answer. Now here you are, young Henry, whisked around like a royal prophecy in human form. You're trained in swordplay, rhetoric, diplomacy, and, most importantly, how to stand still and look regal while your mother rants about stolen thrones. Because after your grandfather died, his cousin Stephen snagged the English crown like a child stealing dessert. Matilda, your dear mother, was not amused. She launched a full-scale campaign to claim what she saw as hers, through war, propaganda, and strategic awkward dinner parties. Quirky detail. At one point, she was so unpopular in London that the people revolted against her arrival, pelting her procession with garbage. Let that sink in. Your mother, a royal empress, was chased out of the capital by flying trash. Medieval Yelp reviews were brutal. She wasn't deterred, of course. Matilda wasn't one to let a little thing like public hatred slow her down. She regrouped, re-strategized, and kept pushing you forward, always you, the rightful male heir, the easier sell. At court gatherings, you were dressed in miniature armor. At age 9, you were expected to give speeches. Not bedtime prayers. Speeches. And she was relentless. No scraped knee, no childhood fever, no tears were permitted to interrupt the campaign. Once, when you fell from a horse during training and broke your wrist, she looked over and said, "It will heal. England needs a king with strong bones." You loved her. Or tried to. But she wasn't the kind of mother who gave hugs. She gave battle plans. Her affection came in the form of titles, Duke of Normandy, Lord of Anjou, like wrapping paper around a future you hadn't chosen. At times, she smiled at you like you were a prophecy fulfilled. Other times, she scolded you for slouching in front of bishops. There was no in-between. You were either the savior of the dynasty or a disappointing shadow of your father. Oh, and that poor man, your father, Count Geoffrey of Anjou, he was practically allergic to your mother's ambition. Their marriage was arranged, loveless, and mostly conducted at a safe political distance. He ruled Anjou. She tried to rule England. You were the thread between them, yanked in every direction. When your mother marched through England in full armor, demanding allegiance, you remained behind in France. Shielded, perhaps. Or sidelined. Historians still debate whether she kept you there for safety or simply didn't want a child slowing her down. Either way, you grew up hearing about your mother's campaigns in letters written in stiff Latin. She eventually gained the upper hand, briefly. Captured Stephen. Declared herself Lady of the English. And then lost it all again within months. Why? Well, she was, frankly, terrible at PR. She refused to be crowned queen, insisting on empress. She alienated supporters. She insulted nobles. One chronicler said she ruled like a man, which, in medieval terms, meant decisively, but unfashionably. Still, she never gave up. And neither did you, because by now her cause had become your identity. You weren't just a boy anymore. You were a weapon honed by years of courtly manipulation and whispered speeches at your bedside. You knew how to hold a goblet without shaking. How to nod sagely at counts twice your age. How to suppress every childish instinct. By the time you were 14, she began grooming you not just for the English crown, but for the kind of cold-blooded kingship she herself could never achieve. That became her legacy, not ruling England herself, but crafting a ruler in her image. She taught you lessons in diplomacy that sounded more like threats. A kind word opens doors, she'd say, but a bribe keeps them open. When you asked about love, she told you, it's easier to rule people who fear losing you. Charming, really. One night, as rain tapped against the shutters and the candles guttered low, she told you her dream. You'll sit the throne one day, she whispered, combing your hair. Not because they love you, but because they fear what I've taught you to become. And you believed her. But here's the twist, eventually, you did take the crown. You became Henry II of England. And how did you repay your mother, the one who fought so ruthlessly for your birthright? You exiled her to Normandy and rarely saw her again. She lived out her days in quiet dignity, still writing letters, still scheming on your behalf, just at a comfortable distance. Historians still argue whether you loved her, feared her, or simply outgrew her. Maybe all three. But one thing certain, when you sat the throne, the shadow of Empress Matilda stretched across every decision you made. Every treaty signed. Every rebel executed. Every time you tucked your own children into bed, if you ever did, you remembered the woman who raised you to be a king, not a son. And you never once, ever, slouched in front of a bishop again. Your breath fogs the air as you step through the thick stone corridors of the French palace, the wind dragging at the tapestries like ghosts with unfinished business. You're only a boy, but every footstep echoes with judgment. They're watching. Always watching. And right beside you walks your mother, Isabella of France, the Queen of England, the daughter of Philip IV, known to history, and to her enemies, as the she-wolf of France. You don't understand that nickname yet. But one day, you will. Your mother. She's dazzling. Cold as the moon. Polished like a blade. When she walks into a room, silence snaps into place, as if the air itself knows better than to challenge her. And yet, there's something missing from her touch, something mothers are supposed to have. Warmth. Instead, she offers elegance, pride, and a near-religious obsession with vengeance. Because your father, Edward II, is a disaster of a king. He loves his favorites more than he loves his wife. Men like Piers Gaveston and Hugh Despenser. He gives them titles, lands, jewels, affection. And your mother? He gives her nothing. Not love. Not power. Not even basic respect. Historians still argue whether Edward's relationships were romantic or merely politically dangerous, but one thing's clear, your mother took it personally. And now, so will you. When you're still young enough to need a tutor to explain what a regicide is, your mother is already plotting one. The court becomes a battlefield. Whispers slither through the halls. You don't get lullabies, you get lessons in suspicion. She teaches you how to read people with a glance, how to keep your words measured and your face still. When you cry over a skinned knee, she tells you, pain is proof you're still alive. Use it. She doesn't say I love you. She says you'll thank me one day. It's a strange kind of bedtime story, one laced with betrayal and bloodlines. You fall asleep to tales not of dragons and fairies, but of bad kings and better plots. She tells you about her father, Philip the Fair, who burned Templars alive and looked into fire without blinking. You dream of smoke and masks. When things get especially tense in England, she sends you away, to France, to safety, to separation. You're young, frightened, and confused. But she stays. Gathering allies. Writing letters. Plotting a return. Quirky detail. On her return voyage to England, she sails with a mercenary army and her lover, Roger Mortimer, a man whose name you will eventually learn to loathe. She dresses in armor, raises a banner of rebellion, and marches across England with the fury of 10 queens. She captures your father. She has him imprisoned, humiliated, and ultimately, well, we'll never know for sure. He dies in Berkeley Castle, his death recorded with unsettling vagueness. Some say illness. Some say murder. Some whisper something far more brutal, involving red-hot pokers and twisted revenge. Scholars still debate what really happened. But what matters most is this: your mother did it all in your name. You're proclaimed king, King Edward III, to be exact, while still a teenager. Crowned under the shadow of your father's disgrace and your mother's ambition. She becomes your regent. Mortimer becomes the power behind her throne. And you? You're the boy in the crown, barely tall enough to reach the sword hanging at your hip. They treat you like a symbol. A mascot for their new regime. You attend court in gold-trimmed robes, nod politely through affairs of state, and learn to smile while being ignored. And your mother? She co-rules without hesitation. She sits at the council table. She whispers in Mortimer's ear. She signs decrees with your seal. Sometimes, you think she forgets you're the king. Until you remind her. You wait. You observe. You learn, just as she taught you. And one moonless night, at age 18, you strike. You arrest Mortimer in the dead of night, charging him with treason. Your mother is caught off guard. For the first time, she's not in control. You banish her from court, strip her of power, and place her under comfortable house arrest. A quiet estate. Rich tapestries. Dignified isolation. She lives out her days surrounded by luxury, but far from your crown. Historians still argue about your motives. Was it justice? Vengeance? Fear? Did you do it out of anger, or love twisted into something unrecognizable? You never executed her. You never imprisoned her in chains. But you never saw her as a mother again, either. And she never apologized. Instead, she sat in her gilded cage, still regal, still sharp, embroidering scenes of your childhood with hands that never quite learned how to hold a baby. Visitors claimed she seemed content. Others said she watched the horizon like someone waiting for a storm to return. She died quietly, wrapped in fine linens, her title intact but her legacy stained. And when they buried her, they placed beside her a crown she never wore. You, now a powerful king, never visited her grave. That, in itself, is a kind of bedtime story. A soft ending. No dragons. Just distance. She made you who you were, but not who you wanted to be. And sometimes, on the nights when the stars seem too quiet and the wind slips through the castle cracks just like it used to when you were small, you wonder what kind of mother she might have been if she'd chosen love over power. But she didn't. And neither, perhaps, did you. The bells of Pamplona toll softly in the distance, but they don't ring for celebration. They never really have, not for you. You're the heir to the kingdom of Navarre, but your nursery echoes like a monastery, and your mother? Well, she's technically still your mother. Legally. Biologically. But as for emotionally, she might as well be a shadow stitched to a cloak. You don't remember her face. Her name is Joan II of Navarre. Born a French princess. Raised among the Valois. Married off in a delicate political deal and plopped down into a crown she neither asked for nor particularly wanted. But here's the twist, when you were born, she decided she'd rather rule alone than raise a child. So, she named you heir, and then promptly disappeared. Historians still argue whether she entered that convent out of genuine piety, subtle political exile, or just a desperate need for quiet. Some suggest she feared childbirth so much that she couldn't bear the idea of repeating it. Others believe she saw herself more as a steward of the realm than as a mother. Either way, she left. No note. No lullaby. No rocking cradle in the middle of the night. You're raised by nurses, advisors, and the occasional stern bishop who lectures you on moral conduct before you've even learned to tie your own shoes. Your name, Charles, is spoken in halls with a sense of obligation. People bow. People smile. But behind your back, they whisper. The motherless king. The boy of empty corridors. Quirky detail. The midwife who delivered you wrote in her journal that you were the quietest newborn she'd ever seen. He blinked once, she said, and then fell asleep, as if dreaming of silence. Even the palace dogs seem unsure what to make of you. Meanwhile, your mother lives in stately semi-retirement. She prays. She reads scripture. She embroiders tapestries of saints who look suspiciously like French royalty. Occasionally, she writes to the court, but rarely to you. When she does, the letters are distant, formal. To the crown prince, may God grant you temperance and fortitude. No pet names. No love, mother. Just a wax seal and a signature that feels like a verdict. And yet, she rules. She signs laws. Hosts visiting nobles. Oversees land disputes with the precision of a surgeon and the warmth of a tax collector. One noble famously said she governed like a ledger come to life. You grow up learning what she does, not who she is. Your tutors show you documents she's signed. Edicts she's drafted. They praise her command of Latin and her caution in foreign affairs. But they don't tell you what she smelled like. Whether she laughed. What her voice sounded like when she wasn't giving orders. You're 17 when you finally see her again. She stands in the hall like a statue carved out of cold marble, taller than you remembered, sharper too. Her gown is immaculate. Her gaze even more so. You hesitate, waiting for her arms to open. They don't. Instead, she nods. You've grown. No one talks about your reunion afterward. The courtiers smile, the scribes take notes, and you pose for a portrait beside her, your expressions both wearing the same tight-lipped, diplomatic neutrality. The painter later says it's his least emotional royal commission. 2 stone lions in a winter garden, he calls it. Still, you try. You ask her questions. You speak carefully, trying not to sound like the child she never raised. You mention your studies, your opinions on land reform, your plans for foreign diplomacy. She nods politely, as if you're a visiting ambassador from somewhere vaguely important. She leaves again the next morning. And you are left in that same silence, heavier now with the knowledge that sometimes, a mother returns only long enough to confirm she was never really there to begin with. But here's the thing, she wasn't cruel. She wasn't Isabella with her revolts. Or Matilda with her war councils. Or some whispering widow plotting poison in the nursery. She was simply absent. Historians still debate whether emotional neglect counts as cruelty in medieval records, but you know. You feel it. The chill behind every title. The space between heir and son. The way your name never quite felt like it belonged in her mouth. Later in life, when you take the throne as Charles II, nicknamed Charles the Bad by those who really don't like your tax reforms, you carry with you a lingering frost. You know how to command. How to punish. How to negotiate with your chin raised just high enough to discourage eye contact. But you never learn how to forgive her. When she dies, you weep, but only in private. And even then, you're not sure whether you're mourning her absence or the idea of what she might have been. You attend the funeral in full regalia. You bow at the altar. You recite the words. But when the tomb is sealed, it feels more like a final punctuation mark on a sentence that never quite made sense. Later still, when your own children cry in the night, you freeze in the doorway, unsure whether to enter. Whether your presence would soothe, or just repeat history. The worst mothers, after all, aren't always the loudest or the bloodiest. Sometimes they simply vanish. Quietly. Elegantly. with royal signatures and perfect grammar. And you? You grow up wondering if a kingdom is ever really worth the price of being forgotten. You don't remember a life without war. Your earliest memories aren't of lullabies or warm embraces, they're of horses snorting in frost, of tents flapping like wounded birds in wind, of steel glinting in torchlight. And always, always her voice, your mother's voice, cutting through the chaos like a blade. Margaret of Anjou doesn't soothe. She commands. She doesn't cradle you. She prepares you. Because you're not just her son. You're her weapon. The year is 1453. You are Prince Edward of Westminster, heir to the English throne. Technically. Sort of. Because your father, King Henry VI, is not entirely well. Gentle, pious, sweet, but soft. Too soft. His crown is slipping, and the wolves are circling. The wars of the roses are beginning, and you're smack in the middle, dressed in royal baby clothes, oblivious to the blood already soaking into the carpet beneath your cradle. Margaret watches all of it with the expression of a queen who's already building a second, stronger future in her mind, one where you reign, not your faltering father. The moment she holds you, she doesn't sigh or smile. She evaluates. Her grip isn't tender, it's possessive. Quirky little detail. According to court gossip, your mother took an oath in your nursery to see you crowned, even if she had to wade through blood up to her waist. Cozy bedtime energy, right? And she meant it. From your earliest days, Margaret surrounds you with tutors, knights, and strategists. Your toys are miniatures of your eventual tools, tiny swords, model siege towers, even a wooden crown painted gold. You don't play so much as rehearse. The concept of pretend never really makes it into your vocabulary. When other boys chase frogs in the moat, you're memorizing ancestral claims to the throne. Historians still argue whether your mother loved you or simply used you as a symbol, England's last hope for the House of Lancaster. But symbols don't cry when they fall off ponies. So when you do, Margaret instructs the groom to teach you to ride again, immediately. There are no scraped knees. Only opportunities for discipline. By the time you're 6, you've been paraded through more courts and battle camps than most squires twice your age. You sit through war councils, legs dangling from high-backed chairs, watching men debate borders while your mother leans close and whispers who the traitors are. You learn to recognize the names York and Neville not as people but as infections, threats to be cauterized. Then comes the rumor. Whispers spread that you are not, in fact, the legitimate son of King Henry VI. That your mother, desperate for an heir, may have turned to another man. Maybe the Duke of Somerset. Maybe a noble no one dares name. Gossip clings to you like damp mist. The bastard prince, some mutter behind goblets. Margaret hears it all. And instead of denying it meekly, she leans into it like a storm. She makes you louder. Stronger. More public. She commissions portraits of you in full armor, standing tall beside your frail father, who can barely hold his own scepter. You, with cheeks still round from childhood, are already sharper than he is. She trains you to speak with authority. To denounce Yorkist claims. To issue proclamations. Once, at a court feast, a noble snickers when you call yourself England's future. Margaret hears. She doesn't correct him. She has him exiled. Because if they won't respect your birthright, they will fear your name. By the time you're 13, you're leading soldiers. At least, in name. Behind the banners and speeches, your mother pulls every string. She marches beside you, armored and resolute, commanding men twice your age with fire in her voice and ice in her eyes. One chronicler wrote that Margaret was more man than any noble on the field, and yes, that was supposed to be a compliment. Sort of. Still, your enemies aren't sleeping. The Yorkist faction, led by Edward IV, rises with ruthless momentum. Your father is captured, deposed, humiliated. You and your mother flee to France, hoping for sanctuary, support, revenge. She negotiates marriages, makes promises, sharpens alliances like knives. She never cries. Not once. Not even when you ask her, gently, if father is still alive. She just says, "We will return. And when we do, you will take what is yours." And so you believe it. The final act comes in 1471. You and Margaret return to England with a French-backed army. You march, side by side, into the maw of civil war. At the Battle of Tewkesbury, you're 15 years old. Still a boy. But with your mother's expectations burning in your chest like hot coals, you ride into battle as if you're already king. And you die. Historians still argue how. Some say you fell in combat, brave but untrained. Others claim you were captured and executed by Yorkist forces, perhaps even in front of the future Richard III. The official story is vague. The unofficial one, infinitely darker. Margaret is captured. Her son, the one she swore would wear a crown, is gone. She's imprisoned in the Tower of London, her rage finally silenced. When she's released years later, broken and old, she returns to France not as a queen, not even as a mother, but as a woman with nothing left to protect. And you? You become a footnote. Edward of Westminster, the only heir apparent to die in battle. A prince raised not with lullabies, but with marching orders. And somewhere in the stone ruins of Tewkesbury, if you listen close, the wind might still carry her voice, whispering, "He would have been king." The tower is cold. Not just from the wind seeping through the ancient cracks in the walls, but from the silence, the heavy, deliberate kind that hangs in the air when something's been hidden. You're a boy of maybe 9. 10 at most. Old enough to know something is wrong. But not old enough to stop it. And your mother? She's nowhere to be found. No tearful goodbye. No final embrace. Just a quiet exchange behind a tapestry, a few whispers with the Lord Chancellor, and the sound of heavy boots approaching your chamber. You're handed over like a parcel. A prince, yes, but a small one. A boy in fine velvet and frightened eyes, clutching a wooden carving that still smells like the forest it came from. And then, the door locks behind you. The Tower of London. It's supposed to be a royal residence, but let's be honest, if you're a child and they put you here, things aren't going well. You sleep under the gaze of beefeaters and bishops. The guards say kind things, but they won't look you in the eye. And every day, you ask the same question. Where's mother? They say she's praying. They say she's grieving. They say she's busy. You're Edward V. Or at least, you're supposed to be. Your mother is Elizabeth Woodville, the widow of Edward IV and a woman whose name still sparks either admiration or loathing, depending on who's holding the goblet. Born a commoner, she married into royalty, outmaneuvered seasoned nobles, and raised a brood of children who were polished like precious stones, and just as vulnerable. She was bold. Strategic. Beautiful in a way that made other courtiers suspicious. And when your father died, she moved fast, trying to secure your crown before the vultures started circling. She failed. Historians still argue whether she trusted the wrong people, hesitated at the wrong moment, or simply underestimated the ruthlessness of Richard, Duke of Gloucester, your uncle. Richard promises safety, protection, a smooth transition. He convinces your mother to hand you and your brother Richard over, ostensibly for your own good. He smiles. He bows. And then he sends you both to the Tower. You don't see her again. Quirky little tidbit. She retreats to Westminster Abbey with your sisters and younger siblings, claiming sanctuary, a medieval version of pressing the panic button. She spends her days cloistered among the Abbey's cool stones, writing letters, and clutching relics. Some say she negotiates desperately from within those walls. Others claim she's plotting revenge. But to you, her son, it's just silence. At first, life in the Tower isn't terrible. You have books, meals, your brother. But the guards begin changing. The courtiers stop visiting. One morning, your tutor doesn't come. And the light from your chamber window starts to feel narrower. And then, one day, your brother vanishes. You wait. You pace. You ask questions. The guards shrug. And then one night, the door opens, and closes again. You're no longer seen in public. No official announcements. No coronation. No mother. Only whispers. The prince is in the Tower, people call you now. A phrase soaked in mystery and regret. Did you die there? Were you smothered in your sleep? Did someone slip poison into your evening broth? Historians still debate. Some say Richard III had you murdered to clear his path to the throne. Others suggest you were secretly rescued, spirited away to foreign lands, growing old under a false name while your mother wept for ghosts. Some even say she knew that Elizabeth Woodville made a bargain with the devil she recognized in her brother-in-law. A quiet exchange, her son's for her daughter's safety. It's never proven. But the rumors persist. Because she lived. She eventually emerged from sanctuary. Lived in quiet dignity. Watched as her daughter married Henry Tudor, soon Henry VII, and united the warring houses of Lancaster and York. The Wars of the Roses ended with a marriage. Not a battle. But not for you. For you, the story stopped in that tower. And she? She carried on. No tombstone bears your name. No memorial graces the chapel. You are a historical ellipsis, vanished. And whether she mourned you behind the abbey walls or hardened her heart like polished oak, no one knows. She left no diary. No confessional letter. Only the echo of her silence and the legacy of her daughter, Queen Elizabeth of York, born of war, sealed in compromise. Elizabeth Woodville died quietly, in Bermondsey Abbey, surrounded by nuns and incense, not long after the rise of the Tudors. She was no longer queen. No longer mother of the missing. Just a shadow tucked inside history's margins. You never got to ask her why. Why she handed you over. Why she didn't fight harder. Why the softest moment you can recall is her fingers combing through your hair one spring afternoon, whispering that everything would be fine. It wasn't. And still, when the wind whips through the tower's upper windows, brushing past cold stone and rusted hinges, some say you can hear the faint sound of children's laughter, or a mother's voice saying your name one last time. The court smells like incense, crushed violets, and something faintly metallic, like dried blood behind a golden screen. You're a princess now, technically. But you've never felt safe. Not even as a baby. Because your mother, Elizabeth of Bosnia, is the kind of mother who makes you feel like the room got colder when she entered. Not icy. Just sharp. And her idea of maternal love? It's ambition, lacquered over with distant smiles and calculated touches. You are Mary of Hungary, and from your earliest breath, you know you're part of a plan. Elizabeth isn't interested in bedtime stories. She's interested in alliances, land treaties, and thrones, specifically, the one she wants you to sit on. Even if it means dragging you through a childhood littered with betrayal, whispered poisonings, and one very awkward coronation dress that makes you feel like you're being wrapped for royal sacrifice. Your father, King Louis I of Hungary, dies in 1382. The court goes quiet. And then your mother makes her move. Not as a grieving widow. Not as a gentle regent. But as a power broker with an iron will and a teenage daughter in a glittering cage. And you? You're crowned Queen of Hungary within days. You're not even 12 years old. She sits beside you on the throne. Not behind. Not beside. On. She rules in your name, but also in her own. Her signature appears beside yours on royal decrees. Her seal is pressed into the wax just as firmly. You're both queen. But one of you knows how to wield a dagger under the table. Guess which one? Quirky detail. She once allegedly had an entire wedding celebration halted because the guest list did not include the name of a regional noble she deemed politically essential. The man lived over 500 miles away. She sent a boat. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth was protecting you, or using you. Maybe both. But you're too young to ask the right questions. You're just trying to keep up, trying not to cry in front of the guards who keep changing uniforms every time your mother flips allegiances. She arranges a marriage for you with Sigismund of Luxembourg. A powerful noble, strong claim to royal blood, convenient timing. You don't know him. He doesn't know you. But he arrives with horses, banners, and a smile he probably practiced in front of a mirror. Your mother looks at him like a banker eyeing a promising ledger. Then the revolt begins. Croatian nobles and rival factions say no, no foreign queens, no foreign influence. You're kidnapped. Held hostage. Your mother panics, finally. But not because you're her daughter. Because you're her investment. She plots. She writes. She manipulates. Then she sends a fleet. You're rescued in a night raid that leaves several of your captors dead and you shaken, blood on your slippers. You return to court a little less naive. A little more like her. You start noticing things. The way your food tastes different when it's been sitting too long. The way certain handmaids disappear. The way your mother smiles like she's practicing for a sculptor who'll carve her into stone. And then comes the most brutal turn. Sigismund demands actual power. Not just a ceremonial marriage. He wants to rule. Your mother, shockingly, refuses. She banishes him. Sends him sulking back to his estates with a small army of insulted knights. He comes back. With more soldiers. And suddenly, you're not a queen. You're a liability. You're locked away. For your own safety, they say. Elizabeth tries to rally forces. Tries to cling to what little leverage she has. She even attempts to reclaim Croatia with a mercenary band of nobles, but by then, the tide has turned. And so has public opinion. Rumors bloom like bruises. That Elizabeth poisoned her enemies. That she ordered assassinations in your name. That she kept a list of problematic courtiers written in lemon ink and hidden inside her prayer book. That she planned to remove Sigismund permanently, and even you, if you turned against her. No one knows which stories are true. But they stick. And then comes the last, most grotesque chapter. You're both captured. You and your mother, fleeing through the forests of Hungary in disguised carriages, intercepted by Croatian rebels who once kissed your coronation ring. They take you to Novigrad Castle, a bleak fortress surrounded by fog and forest. The walls drip with cold, and the guards won't look you in the eye. You sleep beside your mother, barely speaking. She paces. She scratches invisible plans into the stone with her fingernails. She whispers to saints under her breath. One day, you wake up, and she's gone. Strangled. In the chapel. They say it was swift. They say it was a statement. They say it was meant to end her reign in blood so thick it would drown her legacy. You are spared. Maybe out of pity. Maybe because they're afraid of what killing you would do to the realm. But you feel it. Her absence is not comforting. It's eerie. As if the room has forgotten how to hold its shape without her. You eventually marry Sigismund for real. You co-rule. You endure. But something in you hardens. You no longer flinch when courtiers lie. You learn to speak in double meanings. You read people's eyes before their lips. And at night, you sleep light. Always light. You were never mothered in the way a child should be. You were raised like a relic. Protected like a crown. Shaped like a weapon. And in the candlelit silence of your chambers, you sometimes whisper to the ceiling, was she proud? Or just persistent? No answer comes. Only the rustle of the tapestry she once embroidered, of two queens, side by side. One with a crown. The other with a knife. The Sicilian air is sweet, honey thick with the scent of citrus, sea salt, and flowering myrtle. You're a child, swaddled in silk and perfumed by politics. And your mother? She carries you like an empress holds a standard, high, proud, and not without danger. Her name is Constance of Sicily. But to you, she's simply Mama. The problem is, she had you at 40. In medieval terms, that's practically ancient. And not just unusual, scandalous. Women of royal blood were expected to produce heirs like grapes on a vine. Young. Fresh. Fertile. But Constance? She waited. Or fate made her wait. Historians still argue whether it was illness, strategy, or prophecy. Either way, by the time she conceives you, Frederick, she's become a walking contradiction, a devout noblewoman, a cloistered royal, and suddenly, a mother. And not just any mother. The mother of the future king of Sicily, Holy Roman Emperor, and the man who will one day be called Stupor Mundi, the wonder of the world. No pressure, right? But here's the thing. The moment you're born, rumors start. Ugly ones. The kind that don't disappear, they ferment. That you're not really her child. That you were smuggled in by midwives, swapped from a peasant cradle to royal arms. That no woman her age could have borne a healthy boy. That the whole birth was a hoax, staged like a miracle play with a crying infant in place of the Virgin's dove. Constance hears all of it. She doesn't cry. She acts. And what she does next? Bold, bizarre, and very on brand. She has you taken, as a newborn, into the public square of Jesi. Carried by noblewomen, flanked by bishops, held high before a crowd of skeptical merchants, farmers, and gossip-thirsty widows. She strips your royal linens and shows you to the people, naked. Yes. Fully unclothed. As if to scream, look at this child. Flesh of my flesh. A royal baby, not a peasant pawn. Quirky tidbit. She even invites midwives to inspect you publicly. Hands poke, prod, declare. Healthy, they say. Whole. Legit. The medieval version of a birth certificate was pretty invasive. The crowd murmurs approval. Applause? Not exactly. But no one throws tomatoes, and that's saying something. Still, the moment she hands you back to the nursemaid, she whispers, "This world will never be kind to you." She's right. You're born into a fractured kingdom, where popes glare across borders and nobles sharpen daggers behind tapestries. Your father, Henry VI of the Holy Roman Empire, dies when you're only 3. Suddenly, you're not just an orphan prince. You're an opportunity. Constance panics. The empire is crumbling. Your future teeters on a knife edge. So she makes a desperate choice. She places you under the protection of the Pope. Yes, the same papacy your father fought with, the same church that once declared war on your family. She hands you off like a hostage in holy robes. A gesture of peace. A plea. A trap. And then she dies. Some say poison. Some say heartbreak. Others say she simply gave all her strength to one final gamble and then closed her eyes forever. You are 4 years old. And you will never see her again. Your earliest memories are of stone courtyards and stern priests. You're educated in Latin before you can pronounce your own name. Taught to kneel before altars, not mothers. To write decrees before you learn to play. Your childhood is bureaucratic, sacred, and thoroughly unloved. And yet, you remember her. Vaguely. Like the scent of myrtle in spring. A hand brushing your cheek. The velvet press of her lips to your brow. And the echo of a woman who dared to hold up her child naked to a kingdom and say, "This is mine." Historians still debate whether Constance was brilliant or desperate. Whether her theatrical act saved your life or merely postponed the chaos that would follow. But one thing's certain. She fought like a mother who had everything to lose. And when you finally grow tall enough to look men in the eye, when you become Frederick II, Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, you remember what she taught you, not in lessons, but in example. That perception is power. That rumor is a battlefield. That silence can be more dangerous than any sword. You speak 6 languages. Write poetry. Study science. Welcome Muslim scholars into your court. You're the kind of ruler who makes priests nervous and poets swoon. You govern like a Renaissance mind trapped in a medieval cage. But you never forget the smell of Sicilian oranges. You never forget the woman who marched you into public view like a queen carrying proof of divinity. You never forget the risk she took. Because while others made you into a ruler, she made you real. She gave you a name. A body. A claim. And even after her death, you wear her memory like a cloak, woven from scandal, stitched with love, lined with iron. No lullabies. Just legacy. The tent is quiet, but not with peace, only calculation. You sit cross-legged on a thick rug, a child surrounded by maps, daggers, and whispers. Outside, warriors chant in strange tongues, horses whinny with impatience, and banners flicker in the desert wind like flames that forgot how to die. And at the center of it all stands your mother, Sorgatani Becky. She's not a queen in the usual sense. She doesn't wear pearls or lace. Her jewelry is made of bone and jade, her clothes cut for riding, not reclining. And her power? It's the kind that doesn't need a crown. Because she's Mongol. And more than that, she's a Khatan. You are Kublai, her fourth son. And yes, she plans to make you great. Not just a prince. Not just another warrior king stomping across the steppes. But a ruler of worlds. From the moment you can walk, you are part of the plan. She teaches you in whispers before dawn and drills you in courtly tactics under the stars. Your cradle lies beside rolled scrolls and bits of silk, not stuffed animals. Your lullabies are fragments of Chinese poetry, recited from memory, translated from conquered scholars. Quirky historical tidbit. She insisted all her sons be fluent in multiple languages, not just Mongolian, but Persian, Arabic, Uyghur, and Chinese. You're barely out of toddlerhood before you're correcting a court translator's pronunciation. It's adorable and terrifying all at once. But don't get her wrong, Sorgatani isn't warm. She's precise. Her affection is measured like water in a desert caravan. You receive praise only when it's earned, and love is expressed not in hugs but in advantages. You eat when the soldiers eat. You sleep on hides, not cushions. When you're 6, a falcon claws your hand during training. You don't cry, not because you're brave, but because your mother's watching. And she does not blink. She's the widow of Talyui, son of Genghis Khan. A Christian in a sea of shamanists and Buddhists. A foreigner in her own land, descended from a rival people. But that only makes her sharper. When her husband dies, some say from poison, others say from drinking himself into the next world, she does not fade. She consolidates. Manages estates larger than some kingdoms. She keeps her sons alive in a world where uncles and cousins tend to accidentally disappear. Historians still argue how she outmaneuvered so many. Whether it was raw intelligence, unshakable resolve, or a little bit of well-placed fear. But the effect is undeniable, her 4 sons rise like smoke over the horizon. You, Kublai. Monk, who will become great Khan. Hulagu, who will burn Baghdad to the ground. And Eric Boak, the wild card. And she? She watches it all unfold like a general inspecting troops. But what about childhood? What about scraped knees, silly games, storytelling by firelight? She gives you lessons in Confucian ethics instead. Sends you south to study administration from Chinese advisors. Insists you sit in on budget meetings before you're tall enough to see the ledgers without a stool. And all the while, you wonder, does she love you? Or just the empire you might become? Then again, in this world, what's the difference? You don't dare ask. Because love, in her eyes, is not softness. It's survival. Her version of motherhood is protection through excellence. If you are the best, you are alive. If you are second best, you are dead. And yet, she believes in you. She believes in you so fully, so violently, that you begin to believe too. You grow into your role like a sword growing into its sheath. You lead campaigns, you study irrigation systems, you learn the balance between terror and tolerance. By the time you're 30, you're already building the foundation of what will become the Yuan dynasty, the first Mongol-led dynasty of all China. And when you succeed, you know it is not just your victory. It's hers. Because everything you are, every word you speak in foreign tongues, every decree you sign with careful elegance, every diplomat who bows just a little lower than expected, is because of her. Sorgatani dies quietly. No spectacle. No royal funeral in a gilded pagoda. Just a burial among the hills, windswept and spare. And you? You mourn. But only in silence. Because to grieve her publicly would be to suggest she left you unprepared. And that would be a lie. She didn't teach you how to cry. She taught you how to reign. Historians still marvel at her legacy. A mother who raised 4 sons to power, who navigated the most dangerous political landscape of her time and won, without ruling officially for a single day. She never held the title of Khan. But in every way that mattered, she was sovereign. You still carry her strategies in your bones. Her expectations in your breath. And late at night, when you face decisions that could shape, or destroy, entire kingdoms, you remember her final words to you. Rule not with fear alone, but with memory. Let them remember who raised you. And you do. The halls of Castile echo like a monastery and a prison rolled into one, stone, cold, reverent, and entirely suffocating. You are a child in a world that mistakes silence for peace and obedience for love. And your mother? Isabella the First of Castile. Yes, that Isabella. The one with the unblinking gaze, the crown forged in blood and righteousness, and a tendency to bring both to the breakfast table. She is the Catholic Queen, the architect of a unified Spain, the launcher of Christopher Columbus, the iron fist inside a pearl-embroidered glove. And she does not parent like other monarchs. She governs you like a province. You're Joanna, her second daughter, better known to history as Joanna the Mad. But that label comes later. Right now, you're just a quiet girl in the heavy dress, trying to read the room while your mother turns everything into a crusade. Your toys. Catechisms and wooden rosaries. Your lullabies. Latin hymns. Your bedtime stories. Martyrs. Always martyrs. Because in your mother's eyes, saints are preferable to scholars, and pain is proof of virtue. Quirky detail. Isabella reportedly insisted that her daughters learn to spin and sew alongside their education in statecraft and languages. She wanted them to be queens and weavers, because a woman's throne is in her virtue. Even while forging one of the most powerful monarchies in Europe, she still expected her girls to darn their own sleeves. You love her. You fear her. You watch her move through the court like a force of nature in layered velvet. When she kisses your forehead, it feels like a benediction. When she scolds you, the air in the room seems to ripple. And she never, not once, asks you what you want. Historians still debate when your descent into madness began. Some blame your strict upbringing. Others point to genetic predisposition. After all, your Habsburg bloodline had more loops than a poorly drawn pretzel. But if they really want to find the first crack in your sanity, they should look at your wedding. You are married off to Philip of Burgundy, Philip the Handsome, because he has land and lineage and the cheekbones of a man who never hears no. You're barely out of girlhood when you're sent across Europe like a diplomatic letter, sealed and unread. And the moment you meet him, something unravels. He's charming. Cold. Faithless. The kind of husband who smiles at you in public and visits other women in private. And you? You adore him. Desperately. Dangerously. You love like no one taught you how. Because your mother never did. She wrote to you about duty. About God's will. About the burden of queenship. But never about how it feels to be gaslit in a foreign court. To sob into pillows while courtiers snicker outside your chamber. To lie awake, pregnant and abandoned, while your husband dances with courtesans. And then, when he dies suddenly at age 28, possibly poisoned, historians still argue, you break. Not a small break. You carry his coffin across Castile. Literally. You travel with it. Sleep beside it. Whisper to it. Defend it from priests and insects alike. People begin calling you insane. Maybe you are. Or maybe you just never learned how to grieve in silence like your mother. Isabella, of course, hears of all this from her throne in Castile. And how does she respond? By sending an armed escort to remove your children and strip you of political authority. Not with hugs. Not with support. With containment. Because in her mind, you're no longer a daughter. You're a threat. A complication. An unstable heir in a world that demands steadiness. When she dies in 1504, she leaves a will more carefully written than any lullaby she ever gave you. In it, she outlines a succession plan designed to contain your influence. You are technically queen, but your father, Ferdinand, rules as regent. Your role is symbolic. Your voice muted. You sit in the palace in Burgos, mourning your mother, your husband, your freedom. And you wonder, was I ever truly hers? Did she ever see me, or only the heir she hoped would mirror her glory? She once led inquisitions, you know. Signed edicts that exiled thousands. Oversaw torture chambers with rosary in hand. Her faith was unshakable. Her legacy monumental. But as a mother, she taught you obedience. Not resilience. Piety. Not peace. And the final irony. When you're locked away for the rest of your life in the fortress at Tordesillas, declared mentally unfit to rule, controlled by your own son, you carry with you her Bible. It sits beside your window for years. Pages thinned by fingers that never turned them for love, only for answers. You speak to no one. Or everyone. It depends who's writing the chronicle. Sometimes they say you scream at ghosts. Sometimes you don't speak for weeks. Sometimes you call out to your mother, begging her to explain why faith always felt like a cage, and why love was something you had to perform to be worthy of. You die in that fortress after nearly 50 years of confinement. No state funeral. No glowing eulogies. Just a passing mention in the annals of a kingdom that forgot you long before your heart stopped. And Isabella? Her statues still stand. Her name still crowns Spanish churches. But in your silent chamber, it's her voice that echoes longest. God's will, Joanna. Always God's will. And all you ever wanted was her will, just once, to choose you. The Scottish wind doesn't caress. It slaps. Hard. Even in the height of spring, the castle windows rattle like a ribcage in a thunderstorm, and you, tiny, shivering, wrapped in wool that smells like peat smoke and stale lavender, look up at your mother with big eyes and a cold that lives in your bones. Her name is Margaret Tudor. Daughter of Henry VII of England. Sister of Henry VIII. And now Queen of Scots by marriage to King James IV. But none of that matters to you yet. Because right now, she is the one who decides how warm your cradle is. And spoiler, she's too busy deciding which faction she'll back next to check whether you're sleeping through the night. You are James V, son of 2 crowns, heir to a fragile throne, and a pawn in your mother's ever-shifting game of survival, betrayal, and selective affection. Margaret Tudor is not malicious. Let's get that straight. But she is relentless. And, more importantly, ambitious in a country that doesn't want her to be. When your father, James IV, dies at Flodden in 1513, cut down like so many other Scottish nobles in a reckless charge, you are 17 months old. Barely weaned. Practically a bag of velvet-clad meat with a title. And now, you're king. Margaret sees her opportunity. She declares herself regent immediately, because why not? She's the king's widow. The king's mother. The natural choice. Except Scotland disagrees. She's English. Protestant-leaning. A woman. Too assertive. Too clever. And worse, she quickly remarries a young, dashing Scottish noble named Archibald Douglas, Earl of Angus. A move so politically tone-deaf it practically has bagpipes screaming in protest. And now you're a baby stuck between factions, your mother on one side, her enemies on the other, and the throne wobbling beneath everyone's ambition. Historians still argue whether Margaret remarried out of love, lust, or sheer desperation to keep control. But the result is chaos. Nobles declare her unfit to rule. Parliament seizes guardianship of you, little James, and hands it off to your great-uncle, the Duke of Albany, who returns from France to take over. Margaret, furious, flees. She doesn't take you. She takes herself. To England, to France, to wherever her letters of desperation can still find allies. She leaves you behind in a court more interested in control than compassion. And when she returns, it's not with hugs. It's with lawsuits, protests, and smug proclamations. You don't know it yet, but your entire childhood will be one long custody battle. Quirky tidbit. Margaret once allegedly forged a series of letters pretending to be noblemen supporting her regency. Her handwriting wasn't exactly subtle, some of the letters used her favorite phrasing, the Tudor signature, your humble servant, which she apparently forgot to omit. Meanwhile, you grow up wary. Clever. Not trusting of adults, especially not those who call themselves family. You spend your formative years watching power shift hands like a hot poker. One day it's your mother. Then Albany. Then Angus. Then back to Margaret, maybe. And while she writes letters declaring how much she loves you, how desperately she wants to raise you herself, she also lobbies for her own political advantage, throws fits over who gets her dowry money, and spends more time in court intrigue than court nurseries. When you're finally old enough to speak your mind, you do. You take control of your own council at age 12. You exile your stepfather. You sideline your mother. You're done being a pawn. Historians still debate whether Margaret ever truly regained your trust. She tried. She offered advice. She appeared at formal occasions. But she was never quite maternal. She was political. Always political. And you? You learned from her. You married cleverly. You ruled assertively. You schemed ruthlessly. You developed a taste for music and masks, but also for revenge and strict Catholicism. Your reign was turbulent, passionate, and ultimately tragic. Because one day, not unlike your father, you would ride into a conflict you couldn't win, this time against the English at Solway Moss. And you'd lose. Not your head, but your will. You died shortly after, leaving behind a 6-day-old daughter. Her name? Mary, Queen of Scots. And guess what? She'd inherit not only your crown, but your childhood, another royal infant, another widowed mother scrambling for power, another chapter in a long, thorny lineage of queens who mothered kingdoms better than their children. As for Margaret Tudor, she outlived you. She stayed in Scotland, alternating between alliances and enemies like she was changing dresses. She died in 1541, still scheming, still writing letters to her brother Henry VIII, still trying to keep a grip on her legacy. But your memory? It's complicated. You never said much about her publicly. No grand proclamations. No monuments. Just silence. Maybe because you understood her. Or maybe because you didn't want to admit how much her ambition shaped your fears. You were raised on instability. You learned love came with a ledger. And every time you looked into your mother's eyes, you saw a woman trying to be queen and mother at once, and failing over and over again. The French court is a perfume bottle shattered on marble, sweet, expensive, and impossible to clean up without slicing your hands. And you, poor darling, are born into this glittering mess with a name that history will only half remember. You are Henrietta Maria of France, but everyone calls you Minette. And your mother? Marie de Medici. Yes, of those Medici. The ones with popes, poison rings, and a suspicious number of cousins who died suddenly in bathhouses. But this Marie is Queen of France, widow of Henry IV, and quite possibly one of the most impressive political contortionists Europe has ever seen. And yet, as a mother, she's a walking contradiction. On paper, she gives birth to 7 children. 7. Including a future king, Louis XIII, and several duchesses married off like ceremonial wine goblets to the highest bidder. But in practice, she mothers like a monarch. That is to say, from a distance, with advisors, protocols, and occasional letters that start with, "To our beloved daughter," and end with a wax seal thicker than the actual sentiments inside. By the time you arrive, Henrietta Maria, her youngest, you're barely a priority. She's embroiled in court intrigue, political vendettas, and one spectacular feud with Cardinal Richelieu that eventually gets her exiled from her own son's court. Let's repeat that. She is literally banished from the French court. By her own son. Quirky historical tidbit. Marie once had a massive equestrian statue of herself erected in Paris, larger than any built for her husband, Henry IV. It was torn down during her lifetime by her enemies. She simply shrugged and commissioned a new portrait with more embroidery. And while all this is happening, you, the tiny afterthought of a princess, are bundled up and shipped off to England to marry Charles I. A king known for his fine collection of Van Dyck portraits, mumbled speeches, and impending doom. You're 15. Fluent in French, papal loyalty, and how to survive a family that communicates mostly through arranged marriages and dramatic silences. Your mother hugs you at the docks. Briefly. She says, "Be a good queen. Not a happy wife. Not a careful mother, someday. Just, a good queen." And then she leaves. That's your mother's parenting style in a nutshell, performative love paired with practical abandonment. You arrive in England to a court that mistrusts your Catholicism, your accent, your velvet-draped retinue of nuns, and most of all, your Frenchness. And to be fair, you don't make it easy. You refuse to speak English for months. You sulk during Protestant ceremonies. You send letters back home like a hostage waiting for ransom. But slowly, you adjust. You fall in love, actually. Charles I, awkward, sincere, tragic Charles, grows on you. You build a family together. You even develop a reputation for grace, loyalty, and being the heartbeat of the royal household. You have children. Many. Too many, for the dangers of childbirth at the time. And you swear to yourself, "I will not be like her." You will be present. You will nurture. You will not raise your daughters like pawns or whisper to your sons through intermediaries. And for a while, you succeed. But the world doesn't care about your maternal epiphanies. Because the Civil War comes. The English people rise. Your husband is captured, tried, and, yes, executed. His head falls into a basket as you sob in exile. And then it happens. You start to resemble her. Marie. Because survival hardens you. You negotiate for your children's safety. You send secret letters, plot foreign alliances, and arrange marriages with a steeliness that would make any Medici proud. When your youngest daughter falls ill, you do everything in your power to save her, and when she dies, you scream in French prayers so loud they echo through the English embassy in Paris. Historians still argue about your legacy. Were you the brave queen in exile, keeping the royal cause alive through sheer force of maternal will? Or were you another meddling foreign dowager, too focused on titles to see your children's emotional needs? One thing they agree on, you were your mother's daughter. You never escaped her fully. You outlived her by years. You returned to France, bitter and bent, and lived in modest exile, not unlike Marie de' Medici in her final years, dying abroad, surrounded by memories sharper than knives. And in those last days, you found yourself speaking to the air, to ghosts, to a mother who once kissed you goodbye on the docks and never looked back. Did she love you? Maybe. But she taught you something more durable than love. She taught you how to endure. And in the royal courts of Europe, that was often the only kind of parenting that worked. You're not born. You're unleashed. The Spanish court doesn't so much welcome you as brace for you. You arrive into the world with the name Maria Teresa of Spain, Infanta, heiress, icon in training. You are the golden-threaded child of King Philip IV and his niece, Elizabeth of France. Yes, niece, don't ask, royal genetics are a bowl of tangled spaghetti. And from your first breath, your value isn't measured in love. It's measured in treaties. Your mother dies when you're 6. And no one explains it gently. Just a sudden shift in tone. A black veil on your nursemaid. The scent of lilies in the hallway. And your father, stern, kingly, distracted, murmurs something about God's will and needing you to be strong. He pats your head like you're a prized mare. Then he walks away. That's your first lesson in royal motherhood. The silence afterward is louder than the loss itself. So, you grow up at court among tapestries and theological tutors. Every move you make is recorded, critiqued, embroidered into the diplomatic narrative of Habsburg Spain. And though you are young, your father's gaze rests heavily on you, not in warmth, but in calculation. By the time you're 12, you've been promised to half the courts of Europe, Austria, Bavaria, England. Like a highly desirable parcel with polite eyes and a dowry the size of Sicily. But eventually, the French king, Louis XIV, the Sun King himself, wins that game. Or, more accurately, your father loses. You're packed off to Versailles like a porcelain statue in a crate lined with rose petals and war gilt. Your marriage is supposed to cement peace between two countries that have been throwing swords and insults at each other for 100 years. No pressure. You are 17. He is 22. He's already brilliant, already king, already dripping in velvet and self-assurance. You're pale, polite, trembling in an unfamiliar language and an even more unfamiliar dress. And soon, you're pregnant. Repeatedly. Quirky detail. The court of Versailles tracked royal fertility like a national sport. Midwives and nobles would hover outside your birthing chamber, straining to hear the cries of a healthy baby, or the sobs of a failed attempt. And each time you lose a child, which is often, the court murmurs. And your husband turns colder. He seeks comfort elsewhere, with mistresses, dancers, actresses. Women who laugh loudly and don't smell like disappointment. You try to be graceful. Try to embody virtue. But the more you fail to produce heirs, the more you fade into the background of his glittering court. Still, you are a mother. You finally give birth to a surviving son, Louis, the Grand Dauphin. And you adore him. He's fat-cheeked, sweet, occasionally sticky, and the only thing that makes your days at Versailles feel real. But Louis, the king, not your baby, never lets you forget your place. You're his wife. Not his equal. And certainly not the mother of France. Just a function. Historians still debate whether he ever truly loved you. Some say he mourned you deeply when you died in 1683. Others claim he barely noticed, already planning which mistress would be allowed to wear black in your honor. But you never stopped loving. Not your son. Not your country. Not even the man who slowly turned your life into a pageant of decorum and disappointment. And then, just as you begin to accept this as your fate, something shifts. You become respected. Not for your wit. Not for your political prowess. But for your patience. They call you pious. Gracious. Saintly. You become the soft breath in a palace of harsh perfumes. The single candle flickering beneath chandeliers. And your son. He grows into the perfect prince. A little lazy, a bit dull, but obedient and healthy, which in the world of royal succession is practically a miracle. You watch him grow with pride and fear. You smile when he bows. You tear up when he recites his Latin perfectly. You kiss his forehead with the kind of tenderness your own mother never had time to give you. But deep down, you know Versailles has no space for softness. And neither, truly, did your own upbringing. You are a product of diplomacy. Raised to be folded into treaties, written into margins. Your motherhood, while genuine, exists only because it serves a function. Even when you die, it's understated. No great mourning. No national outcry. A quiet burial at St. Denis. The court shifts seamlessly into its next chapter, already rehearsing new performances of grief. And your son. He grows up in the shadow of a father who believes greatness leaves no room for feeling. But sometimes, just sometimes, he glances at a portrait of you in the corridor, and he smiles. He remembers the hands that tucked him in. The lullabies sung in a Spanish accent. The woman who taught him to pray when he couldn't yet speak. Historians call you gentle. Forgettable. But motherhood isn't about public memory. It's about the quiet moments that no painter bothers to capture. The warm milk at midnight. The whispered prayers. The patience no court ever rewards. You wake up to the scent of roses, opium, and regret. It's Vienna. The heart of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, where everything is embroidered, gilded, and eerily quiet. And you? You are Crown Prince Rudolph. But this story isn't about you. It's about your mother, Empress Elizabeth of Austria. Known to most as Sisi. And if you think royal motherhood has been complicated so far, buckle up. Because Sisi isn't just difficult. She's legendary for it. From the outside, she's everything an empress should be. A beauty. A myth. The subject of oil paintings, love poems, and uncomfortable dinner gossip. Her waist is famously 19 inches. Her hair touches the floor. She takes daily ice baths and drinks raw veal juice to maintain her glow. In short, she looks perfect. She just doesn't act like a mother. You, Rudolph, are her only son. Born to great fanfare, military salutes, and a team of nannies who receive more hands-on time with you than she ever will. Because Cece. She runs. Quirky tidbit. She once had her train schedule memorized better than her children's birthdays. She traveled compulsively, Italy, Hungary, Corfu, Bavaria, even the Holy Land. Anywhere but home. Historians still argue why. Some say it was grief. Her first daughter, Sophie, died in infancy while abroad, and Cece never recovered. Others blame the court, stiff, suffocating, ruled by her mother-in-law, Archduchess Sophie, who essentially seized your upbringing. Yes. While your mother posed for portraits, your grandmother took over. She decided your education, your tutors, your meals. Cece, stripped of control, withdrew. Not entirely by choice. Not entirely by accident. You see her sometimes, drifting down palace halls like a ghost with perfume. She rarely speaks to you directly. When she does, it's formal. Distant. As if she's afraid she'll break the glass if she touches it too hard. And yet, when you're very young, she does something extraordinary. She writes pages and pages of poetry, letters, diaries. Her words swirl with sadness, restlessness, and longing for a life she cannot seem to hold still. Occasionally, she writes about you. Never sweetly. But curiously. As if trying to understand how you fit into the story she keeps rewriting in her head. You grow older. And stranger. Clever, but sad. Obsessed with birds and progressive politics. Prone to melancholy, prone to anger. You crave affection but mistrust intimacy. Sound familiar? Yes. You are your mother's son. You write essays about social reform. You question monarchy. You rebel against your father, Emperor Franz Joseph. You sneak into slums and drink with revolutionaries. You dream of a world beyond palaces. And yet, no one listens. Especially not your parents. Your father wants obedience. Your mother offers absence. You ask her once, why she never stays. She says, some women were born to roam. You ask again, why she never fought to raise you herself. She replies, because I wasn't allowed to love in the way they demanded. Her answers never soothe. They only confuse. And so, you fall in love with someone else's wife. A baroness. Young. Impressionable. Madly devoted. You take her to a hunting lodge in Mayerling, wrapped in secrecy and despair. And what happens there? Well, historians still argue. You both die. Gunshot wounds. A suicide pact. An assassination. A desperate act of rebellion. The empire covers it up. But it's clear, something broke beyond repair. Cece receives the news while traveling, of course. And for a moment, she shatters. She wears black for the rest of her life. Refuses to sit for portraits. Refuses to smile. She roams even more, now alone, now haunted. She blames herself. Not publicly, but in her poems, her endless walking, her refusal to speak your name aloud ever again. She starts seeing death everywhere. In trees. In mirrors. in train smoke. Her letters become riddled with phrases like, "The veil is thin," and "My shadow lives where he died." And yet, she keeps moving. Because staying still might mean facing what she lost. And what she never gave. Historians call her a tragic beauty. A reluctant empress. A feminist icon. A poetic soul in a gilded cage. But as a mother, she was a mirror. Elusive. Shimmering. Impossible to hold. And you, Rudolph, spent your entire life chasing that reflection, trying to find warmth where there was only radiance. She died years after you. Stabbed by an anarchist in Geneva while walking by the lake. Her assassin didn't even know who she was, he just wanted to kill someone royal. And as her blood seeped into her corset, she reportedly whispered, "It is nothing." But it was. It was the final chapter in a life spent floating above responsibility, tethered only by sorrow. Her motherhood wasn't cruel. It was incomplete. And sometimes, that's the most dangerous kind of love there is. You're born in a crumbling palace. Not metaphorically, actually crumbling. Paint peels from the ceiling. The mirrors are cracked. The servants whisper. And outside, the people are sharpening their pitchforks, not for show, but with purpose. Because it's Russia. And it's 1904. You are Alexei Romanov. Tsarevich. Heir to the last Russian Empire. But let's talk about your mother. Alexandra Fyodorovna. Born Alex of Hesse, raised in the shadow of Queen Victoria, turned Orthodox Empress by love, marriage, and a bad case of fate. To the world, she is regal, pious, remote. To you, she is everything. But here's the twist, you're not a healthy child. You have hemophilia. A single bump can make your joints swell with blood. A fall could kill you. There's no cure, no treatment. Just, waiting. So your mother turns into something fierce. Something dangerous. Not just a parent. A guardian. A mystic. A one-woman religion whose only God is your survival. She prays over your cradle. She smothers you in icons. She forbids laughter near your bed in case it startles your fragile veins. And when your gums bleed, she doesn't call a doctor, she calls Rasputin. Yes, that Rasputin. The bearded, wandering mystic with eyes like an oil slick and hygiene like a goat's nightmare. He arrives, he whispers, and, miraculously, you improve. Whether through hypnosis, prayer, or sheer coincidence, your bleeding slows. Quirky historical tidbit. Rasputin was once stabbed in the stomach by a prostitute turned religious zealot and survived, claiming his life had resurrected. Your mother believed this made him divinely protected, and, therefore, essential to you. And once she believes, she won't let go. Your father, Nicholas II, is a decent man and a dreadful czar. He governs like someone trying to write in cursive while wearing mittens. But Alexandra? She rules your fate with surgical intensity. She shuts out the court. Fires ministers. Writes letters in German when Russian would do. All in the name of protecting you. Historians still argue if she was naive, fanatical, or simply in denial, but what's certain is that no one came between her and you. Not even your sisters. Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, they love you. But they live in orbit around your illness, around her devotion. You are the sun, and she guards you like a priestess on fire. It isn't nurturing. It's consuming. When revolution comes, it is partly because of Rasputin. His influence over your mother becomes a national obsession. Pamphlets depict him as a demon, whispering poison into her ears. People accuse your mother of treason, of being a German spy, of ruining Russia in the name of a sick child and a false prophet. But to you, she's just Mama. She reads to you by candlelight. She weeps when you cry. She writes in her diary, "God, let me take the pain from him." She would have traded crowns and countries for your life in a heartbeat. The tragedy is, no one ever asked her to. And as the empire collapses, she clutches you tighter. You flee the palace. You live in guarded houses. The snow gets thicker. The bread gets scarcer. The days get quieter. And still, she is there. Praying. Weeping. Watching. Even when the Romanovs are placed under arrest. Even when your name becomes a symbol of royal failure. Even when the guards laugh behind your back. And finally, in the cellar at Ekaterinburg, when the executioners enter, and your whole family is told they're being moved for safety, even then, she stands in front of you. She does not scream. She does not run. She stays. Historians still debate how long it took. Whether you died instantly or lingered. Whether she looked at the killers with dignity or desperation. But one thing is clear, in that final moment, she was a mother first. An empress last. And as the Romanov dynasty fell, not with a bang, but with bullets and silence, her legacy blurred. To many, she was a fool. A fanatic. A woman who mistook obsession for love and brought down an empire in the process. To you, she was safety. Even if it was made of marble, madness, and blind faith. And so she joins the strange, tragic sisterhood of royal mothers who gave everything, yet still lost it all. They weren't cruel, not in the classic fairy tale sense. But they were complicated. And their children? Raised on ceremony, schooled in secrecy, loved too much or not at all. They never stood a chance. So now, as you lie back, eyes soft, breath steady, let these echoes fade. The halls of Castile are quiet. The snowy palace in Russia has gone still. The silk trains of Versailles, the war chants of the Mongol steppe, the dim stone corridors of Scotland, all drifting into silence. You've walked through centuries tonight. Touched the hems of women who ruled with iron, with prayer, with absence, and with desperation. You've been rocked by their mistakes, whispered to by their grief, shielded by their ambitions. And in their arms, too tight, too far, or too late, you've seen the impossible weight of legacy. Not every lullaby is sung. Not every bedtime ends in peace. But here, now, in this quiet moment, the stories are finished. The candles snuff themselves out one by one. The castles crumble gently into mist. The crowns melt into dust. And you? You are still here. Still breathing. Still held, not by queens, but by quiet. So let your thoughts dim like lanterns on a cold road. Let the past become background hum. Let history sleep. Because tonight, you are safe. And no matter how sharp the lineage or twisted the bloodline, the stars above you are soft. And they do not judge.